What makes a YouTube video go viral? Is it the creator or the words they say or something much deeper? In today's episode, we'll discuss why we think that it's actually the psychology of the creator that's used in the video that makes it go viral. So stick around and you too can start using the same methods that we're about to talk about in your own videos to start getting more views. So let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, guys, welcome back to the Video Creator Show, where we talk about all things YouTube and creating content. My name is Augie Johnston. I'm here with my co-host, Grant Ball. We are long-time YouTube viewers and creators, and today we're talking about the psychology that these creators use in order to get more views. And Grant, really, what exactly makes a YouTube video go viral?
Well, the biggest thing is, does it keep people's attention? Not only does it get their attention, I would say a video keeping somebody's attention is more important than getting attention. So, like, is it telling a cohesive story that feels like it really matters or even is interesting? It could just be an entertaining story. It may not even have to, like, literally matter. But if you have a hook in the beginning that it really captures the attention and, like, explains to the viewer what is going to happen, but in a show don't tell kind of way, and then there's a payoff at the end, and perhaps a series of obstacles in between, like that 3-act narrative, however it ends up being told exactly. But that formula is a great way for keeping attention, and I do notice most viral videos, they, not always, but usually tend to have that sort of structure to them.
Okay, so don't give away all the secrets so fast there, but no, but really, just for those that are watching right now, hook, obstacles, and then payoff or reward at the end. So if we're talking about psychology, that is kind of where you want to be at when you're creating a video, and those are great tips right there. So let's talk a little bit about the hook. I've heard someone say that there's multiple ways that you can hook viewers. One being visual. Maybe something crazy happens on camera or just something on camera, right? Maybe you can edit something in visually to help hook them. And the other one would be like verbal. It's like something that you say right out of your mouth that would hook someone in. What other kind of tips do you have for hooks and hooking people in? Like, how can people get better at that?
Well, the biggest thing is, like, I think a question is the best way to formulate a hook, is asking an intriguing question. Take whatever information you have, whatever story you have, and try to distill it down to, like, its finest question of, like, what does all of this mean? Like, is there a way where you can condense everything into one sentence to ask a question that you want to answer? Like, by answering that question, you will then explain how it all works and why all of this matters, why any of this matters. So can you take what you have and create a question out of it? I would say that's the best way to hook people in the very beginning. If you have a video about Fort Knox, this random example, Fort Knox full of gold. Yeah, like how the hell do you get that many tons of gold and keep it safe for an entire century or however long it's been around? There's some drama to that question. It's an interesting one, like maybe some buildup. For example, like all of the known security about Fort Knox, like what goes into protecting this gold that is supposedly there. I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe they're lying to us. Maybe they're not. But build up to that question, like, how did all this become possible? How did it work? And there's an art to, I think, framing the question, like, not necessarily just asking it initially right off the bat, but have a little pizzazz beforehand, like lead into it.
Yeah, like facts.
Tell a story. Facts, yes.
Drop a bunch of facts.
Context.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but I just popped in my head, right? You give some context, some facts, and then you ask that question. That was a great tip. I think that's a great way to craft a hook. And that would be like a verbal hook, right? Obviously you could edit in some visual things too. But you guys that are watching this, we're talking about psychology, right? And so what Grant's talking about in these questions are a lot of times open loops, right? You're opening a loop. And as humans, we need to close that loop. Like, we are dead set on closing those loops when they pop up. So I think that's a great tip for a hook. One other thing that I wanted to mention about hooks is that they matter in the algorithm, right? If you open up your YouTube analytics, you're going to see like one little section that says like, what percentage of viewers who clicked on this video are still watching after 30 seconds? So that'd be the goal, right? If you can hook them and keep somebody watching till 30 seconds and get that percentage up to be like 90% of people that clicked on this video are still watching, like that's going to help in the algorithm. And that's one of the reasons that hooks are so important. Any other reasons that you would say hooks are important, Grant?
Well, they're good for getting attention. So like in the beginning of the video, that's a great way to get somebody's attention. And then keeping attention, kind of again going back to that point, using little hooks throughout the video. Again, like always asking like where am I at in this story? Has it been a while since I've sort of analyzed and explained what's going on to the viewer? And if you're 5 minutes into the video, and the video's like even 15 minutes, however long, you might want to be like, okay, maybe it's time to ask another question. You can keep these little micro hooks. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. But yeah, they're good for keeping attention and getting attention. So I think about it like that, not just hook them in the beginning, but throughout the video, keep them getting into their brain and asking them these interesting questions.
Yeah, and is there like a length that you would recommend that a hook should be?
Just like one sentence, I would say. I guess it depends how you define a hook, right? Like earlier, I was talking about leading up to a question with a paragraph of context and facts and maybe some jokes if that's your style. So you could argue that entire thing is a hook, right? The lead up and the question itself. But I tend to think of hooks as like one sentence, or at least like the most important part of it is probably one sentence. There's like the boss of the hook.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think even up to a minute could be possible for a hook. It just kind of depends on like, if it's a 30-minute video, then I could definitely see a 1-minute hook because you got to kind of set it up. But at the same time, I also think that it's a fine line because like people are clicking on that video and they want to get into the content, right? And I always wonder about that with my own videos and other people's. It's like, some people recommend that at the beginning you should say like, oh, and my name is Augie Johnson, and here are my credentials, X, Y, Z, and like that's a little bit maybe outdated, but that's some people do recommend that you do that. To me, I don't recommend that. I think it's like you said, a 10 to 20-second hook, get into the content, and then continue to micro hook throughout the video. So how would you describe like a micro hook? What is that?
So like one example I've used of micro hooks, they're not even questions necessarily. I call them transition screens. Maybe this only works with like a certain style of video if like comedy is at least somewhat involved, is like transition words like therefore or because or and then this happened. If kind of like you use that to change up the energy. So you finish a thought and then you say and then, and like I don't know, the words and then pop on the screen with like some dramatic sound effects in a music change. To me, that's a form of a hook. I guess I think of it like a transition, but the philosophy there is keeping people's attention, of changing up the energy. You don't want the energy to feel stagnant. So that's like a very specific example of a hook that I use all the time, I think you can really run with that idea in any direction. It doesn't even have to necessarily be for a slightly comedic effect. But go crazy, people.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip because that's when you can start adding those obstacles in, right? I heard somebody talk about this before on a different podcast where they say like they use that exact same framework. And I was walking down the street and then I fell and hit my knee. But there was a medic there, luckily, who tried to help me. And then and you just can kind of keep that story going. I think that's a great example of micro hooks. So let's talk a little bit about the next section, right? So you hook them, you spend a lot of time. Maybe that's where you spend the bulk of your time kind of planning, and maybe you write a hook word for word. And then maybe the rest of your script is bullet points or something like that. You can probably get away with that. But what comes next after the hook?
So the next is like the actual substance, right? You're getting into the nitty gritty of what this video is about. So, if I'm talking about a video game character, let's say I've taken the first minute of the video to tell the viewer why this matters, why it matters to me. I've asked all the big questions that we're going to be exploring in this video. Now we're getting into kind of the nitty gritty. Like, okay, let's get into the information, the lore of this character, the backstory of this character, and really talk about what is really going on, so that we can analyze what is happening. That's a certain style of video. But
Mhm.
if you're more in, like, say, the vlog sphere, I would say this is what we would call the body of, if you're writing an essay in high school, right, there's introduction, body, conclusion. The body is kind of the meat of everything. It's all of the information. It's the bulk of the story. The word obstacles, as we've talked about, like the trials that the characters are going through, the challenges of the day are explored in the body. I guess think about it like that, is like you're really getting into it now. You're getting into the nitty-gritty of the story, with like a few micro hooks kind of sprinkled in along the way. But ultimately, this is kind of where I would almost say this is maybe the most, I don't want to say the most important part of your story, but it might be the least cheesy part of your story. Because, I don't know, if you like go too far with this information with like the intro, you can get to Mr. Beastie with it, maybe. But your body is like really what you're trying to say, hopefully. Like you're not hopefully begging for the viewer's attention. You're just saying things and doing the things that you want to do. And you've sandwiched it between a catchy intro and a mind-blowing conclusion. But in the middle, that's where your maybe core idea is actually happening.
It's the value, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Delivering the value throughout the video. But that was a great explanation, I think, of the body or whatever, because you got to give them what they came for, right? I mean, that's what they clicked on the video because they wanted some content. You got to give it to them, but you don't want to give them the big reward or the big payoff until the end, right? You want to keep them watching. And as far as psychology goes, it's storytelling. Humans love storytelling. So as many stories as you can incorporate is great. They love challenges and obstacles, like you mentioned earlier. What obstacles are in your story? Are you going to be able to overcome them by the end of the story? These are all things to keep in mind, because the main thing you don't want to be is boring, right? Yeah. As soon as you're boring in the body, then you're getting clicked off, right? And so that's a key, is don't be boring, be informative and stuff, but you got to entertain too. I think that's not talked about enough on YouTube. It's like people think, especially like in the business world of YouTube, like, oh, you want to grow your business, start a YouTube channel and teach people, how to do their taxes or whatever your niche is. But it's like that kind of boring content really won't take off unless you can somehow figure out how to incorporate story or some other form of hooking them. It's important. So that's the body. Anything else to add there?
Yeah, just the body is the middleman. Like whatever your core idea is, that is probably where you're really going to explore it in its deepest depths.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the end now. Before we'll dive into some other things too as well. But the end we've been kind of teasing about. It's the payoff. It's the reward. Mr. Beast is kind of the one that I think kind of came up with this idea that every video must offer a payoff, something for the viewers to look forward to at the end of the video. So what role does psychology play in ensuring that these rewards are compelling? Like, how do you make sure that these things are worth sticking around for?
Well, in my style, personally, I like to have it be kind of dramatic, right? Like you want the energy of the final payoff to feel big. Is probably the best, most general advice I can give. Is it should feel like a bang. What I mean by that, so usually that will involve kind of more intense music. It will involve some intense emotions. Like I'm probably like my delivery of lines is going to be more just a lot of emotion behind it. Something has happened and I'm really invested in it, and everything's different now. Is always how I feel during that part of the video. So that's like the most vague advice I can give. And obviously like a way to kind of create that scene is like be conscious of your music choices. It should maybe feel cinematic or intense. There should be an intensity to it. And then if you're on camera, should maybe be an intensity to you, not necessarily in like a serious way, but in a kind of charismatic, compelling way.
I like what you said about like it's something to look forward to, and once it happens, everything is different now. I like that.
Yes,
That's
yes.
good. I like that a lot. I can see a lot of stories ending, building up to that, and then boom, the conclusion, everything's different now. The ways to grow on YouTube have changed. The payoff, it's something that a lot of YouTubers are talking about these days. And I think it's probably one of the most challenging parts of crafting a video, because you got to kind of start the video or start your script with that in mind. You can't just kind of make that up at the end. It's got to be kind of part of the whole entire script. And if you do that, I think that is probably the main key to making a video that's going to go viral and trigger the algorithm and get promoted out. Because if you hook them, that's going to get you, that 1 minute of watch time. If the content's good and you're teasing and you're micro hooking, that'll get you another minute. And if you tease that payoff, that could get you all the way to the end. And if they get to that payoff, then dang, man, they just watched the whole video. Your average view duration is going to be super high. Your watch time for the video will be super high. And that should potentially get the video more views. I want to talk a little bit about the psychology a little bit deeper now. To me, like with marketing and YouTube creation, content creation in general, like the main emotion that you're trying to invoke, to me, is curiosity. Right? If you can get a viewer to be curious, they'll click. If you can now get the viewer to stay curious, they'll watch because they want to know more. So with all that said, why does curiosity play such a big role in people's decisions to, first of all, click on the video and then to keep watching?
Well, I think as humans, we're naturally curious about things. And I think our goal here is to tap into that innate curiosity that we all have. So I feel like when creating a video, I should be curious about the topic. Like I'm not just working on this video to make a video. Like I'm actually exploring something within myself, or I'm exploring something that's important to me. And I think you want your own curiosity to like be contagious to the viewer. Like your curiosity should feel contagious and kind of flow from the progression of the story, of the script. I feel like that's why it's important, is it's tapping into something that is deeply innate to all of us. And we're ideally not just watching videos as like mindless entertainment. Hopefully it's like it is engaging that curiosity. I think brain rot is a legitimate way to get views, as we know. But I think curiosity is the more wholesome way to go about it, and it works very well.
It does. It does. It's a major key in creating your thumbnails, right? And your titles. That should definitely invoke some sort of curiosity to get that click. The next one I want to talk about is social proof, right? If you can provide social proof in your video, if you're trying to teach somebody how to make money online and somebody clicks on your video, like you should provide social proof, like, hey, this is actually going to work. Look at all these thousands of people that have done this exact same thing. Look at Jenny. She, made her first dollar online trying this method. Here's the proof, social proof. Why do you think that is so important to us humans in video content?
I feel like it all comes down to street cred, right? Like we naturally trust people that others trust. So like the more trust there seems to be behind whoever is making this video, or behind anything, the more easily we ourselves are able to put our own trust into that. So I think it's the natural groupthink mentality. The more followers, the more connections somebody has, the more they will have. Generally speaking, there's a momentum to it. So I think that's what it comes down to, is just we're impressed by big numbers.
All right. So kind of the next thing I want to touch on is emotions, right? Invoking emotions, right? Like people love movies that make them laugh, that make them cry, that make them sad, that make them happy, that remind them of the better days, right? So as you're creating YouTube videos, like this is something to keep in mind, right? Is how do you invoke emotion in your viewer? And if you're able to do so, like a lot of times you're able to build kind of that parasocial relationship, right? Where they feel like they know you, you feel like you know them, and there's a connection there. And I think that's a major key and something that a lot of people miss out on, because their content is just like how to tie a tie, A, B, C, D, E. Bye guys. See you next week. When instead you could say, you know, I felt so embarrassed. I was the only kid at the dance that had a clip-on tie. You know, from that day on, I became obsessed with ties. And, you know, now I have this tie company and blah, 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 blah. Sob story creates kind of that emotional impact. What are some like tips and tricks that you have for people that to use emotion in their videos or to invoke emotion?
Sure. So I think even just dissecting the example you just gave, vulnerability, I think being willing to be vulnerable helps people empathize with you and your story and whatever your struggle might be, whatever this video is about. If you are able to be vulnerable in the video, that is a great formula for helping people relate to you. And, you know, of course, if you're covering something that maybe isn't relevant to you, maybe you're making a video about like a historical event, I would say even like working in your own opinions, especially with YouTube itself, right? It's YouTube. So like if you can insert yourself into the situation a little bit. For example, this is a great example. I was watching this history YouTube channel. The name escapes me, but he was talking about how like the 1500s to the 1700s in Europe are actually like his favorite period of history for a variety of reasons. Like it was, you know, post Renaissance and interesting technology, blah, blah, blah. But like he gave that opinion and he got like really into why this was important to him. And then he actually went into the history itself. And he gave examples, but like it was a perfect combination of like how he feels and why he cares, and then the actual information of like, you know, he's showing, not telling. So in that sense, he was sort of, you know, vulnerable is a strong word, but he was authentic with like why this matters to him. He could have just made kind of a dry video about, you know, this happened in the 1500s and wow, how interesting. But no, he like really he put his own feelings into it, and I think that always adds a lot. Vulnerability.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I always think about my own stuff and I'm like, man, I really want to like talk about the hard times and be vulnerable, but it's a scary place to be. And I always wonder if my audience really would like that. You know, just because you don't want to release a bunch of videos and all of a sudden switch up your style on your audience and start doing something totally different. So that's kind of, I guess, my argument against it, but it's kind of an argument that I'm being made because I'm just scared to be vulnerable, right? To the world. It's the world, right? It's not just like a small group of friends. It's the world, and people can always go back and look at it. But I do believe that it helps create that connection with your audience. So the last kind of point I want to bring up here, and maybe the most important one, is if you want a video to go viral, like it needs to be shareable. Okay. It needs to be a video that people would watch and be like, you know what? My brother-in-law would love this video. I'm going to go ahead and hit that little share button and I'm going to send it through iMessage over to him. And that's a major key, I think. So creating shareable content is not easy. And people share videos for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's emotions that make it do it, but why is it important and how can you make your videos more shareable?
I think the more general a video is, the more shareable it tends to be. You know, you hear a lot of advice in the how to build your YouTube channel community, if we'll use that word, about finding your niche, right? But when it comes to shareability, like a great example is the $21,000 airplane seat video by Casey Neistat, where he, you know, got the airline to give him this $21,000 airplane seat, and you know, he filmed the whole experience. And most people have flown on a plane. Like if they have access to YouTube, they've probably been on a plane at least once. And so this is something that I think intrigues people, but it's like general enough to where anybody can watch it. Like everybody is interested in flying to like even a little extent. And that's like, this is the other side of flying. This is the part of flying you've never seen. So I think a video like that has enough general interest. You know, it's not a football video or it's not a video game video. It's like in every man's video, essentially. So yeah, I'd say the more general and less niched down a video is, the more shareable it tends to be. And if you're talking about like super viral, then generally like if there's no swearing or it's like family friendly, hopefully not in like a corny way, then I think that also makes it more shareable. But obviously, like don't squelch yourself to try to make something more shareable. But it's kind of an interesting thing to keep in mind. Kind of the less edgy things tend to be. I think that makes it that's a better formula for like huge virality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. That's why, it's like broad topics normally can reach a larger audience than super niche down. And I mean, I've had clients myself where they're, doing some AI tax stuff or AI, I can't remember. Actually, it was AI stock trading stuff. And boy, when I watched their videos, it was like over my head. I couldn't understand a single thing they were talking about. It was very niche. And that was my advice to him, is like, you got to get a little bit more broad if you want the algorithm to show this to people and them to actually click on it, because otherwise no one knows what you're talking about except for a very, very small piece of the public. So that is a good tip. Last question here. Should YouTube creators be studying psychology? Should they try to read a book? Should they try to learn about what makes humans click so that they can use that in their videos to get better watch time and trigger the algorithm?
I would say no. I would say just make videos that are interesting to you and keep trying to make them better. I think if psychology and that sort of thing actually interests you, then by all means read a book. But in my hypothetical YouTube 101 course, it doesn't involve reading a book on human psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It more involves on honing your own craft of storytelling, and that to me is more important. Is just like making videos. I think being aware of the kind of the simple idea of hook them in the beginning, like tell them why this is important, why they should be watching. Show don't tell, and by that I mean like you don't have to like say it explicitly why they should be watching, but craft a fun, interesting, compelling story, ask the question, give it context, give it a build up, and go from there. So yeah, I just think just make videos. Repetition is your real teacher.
Yeah, that was great. That was a great tip there. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the idea of storytelling. You don't need to read a book on psychology. You need to read a book on storytelling. How can you be a better storyteller? Because that's psychology in itself. Humans, we know we like stories. And the more you can incorporate them into your videos, the better your videos will do. So, all right, guys, I hope you guys liked today's episode. Hope you guys learned something. If you're watching on YouTube, we would really appreciate you to hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on an audio platform, you can hit the follow button there as well. And remember, this is brought to you by vidchops.com. VidChops allows you to add an expert video editor to your team in just a few clicks. So if you need an editor, head over to vidchops.com. And with that said, we will see you guys in the next video.
Bye, everyone.